us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
And you're listening to Diesel Performance Podcast. Guys, we got another UCC competitor special interview put together for you.
Unique vehicle with this guy.
Every year we talk to Chris Buhidar from Truck Source Diesel out of Texas, and every year he's another one of those like real calm, real mellow guys. And then you see him at the track and you're like, oh, I get it. You got all of your aggression out on your truck.
Yeah. Well, he's one of those people, in my opinion, where he has a lot of data. He has a truck that works, Cummins powered Ford, right? Like what else could be better in some guys' eyes? But he's not new to this. He has a lot of experience. He's been competing for years, and he goes to the track and he fucks shit up, man. Like, and not in a bad way. Like, you might not know him, but you know the truck. You know what he's capable of. And all the guys at Truck Source, like they have a really good team down there in Texas.
Absolutely.
So it's nice to get someone like Chris on board and kind of go through that whole process of what's going through his head. Because for him, man, he's just living it. He's enjoying it.
That's right. Well, hey, guys, we're not going to hold you up anymore. Let's get right over to Chris Buhidar from Truck Source Diesel. Chris Buhidar from Truck Source Diesel. How the hell are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing good. Doing good.
Oh, man, we got two Chris's on the show again.
Yeah.
All right.
Just call me Emke.
Emke?
Yep.
And Chris. All right. I got it. I think we could sort out your guys' voices, too.
Yeah.
I think we're good there.
Chris has a deeper voice, so,
Well, full grown up.
I know. I get it.
Chris, we're really excited to have you on the show. You're a competitor at UCC now several times. We're really, really getting into that crunch mode where everybody's in a rush to get ready for UCC. But we'd like to step back and just ask first, can you tell us why you're competing at UCC this year?
Well, I guess it's just like the name says, the ultimate call-out challenge. The baddest guys and the baddest gals and the baddest trucks in the country, that's where they are. That's where they go every year. And so if you want to compete with the best, that's where you compete.
Okay. For some of our newer listeners, right, someone who isn't seasoned and has been to UCC in the past or, new to the industry, can you tell us a little bit about the specifics on, what kind of truck you have and what's the current setup that you're bringing this year?
Sure. It's the truck is a 2000 Ford F-350. It was originally a 7.3 truck, and we have swapped a Common Rail Cummins into it a number of years ago. I bought it originally as just a beater with 430,000 miles on it or something like that. Just to drive around back and forth to work, and I guess it ended up, couldn't leave well enough alone, and added some power, and would take it to the local mud drags and the local quarter mile, and just started having a good time with it. And I guess just like any addiction, it started off simple, and now it's where it's at.
And that is how it feels sometimes when these projects snowball, because you've had this truck for a while now, and you do a lot of competition. Can you kind of give our listeners a rundown of like what your normal year of competition looks like?
I guess it's hard with today's age, because last year was not very normal. So I guess we're a little removed from that, but it was primarily a race truck. That's what we've done with it for probably since 2013, 2014. The quarter mile, eighth mile. We ran the NHRDA circuit when they were still around, and had very good luck with it. In the points chase, won a few world titles with it too. And our thing with it has always been consistency. We always like the competition of the whole year, winning the points title at the end of the year. We never really set the truck up to break records or to set a record every pass. We always like the year-long goals. So re-gearing it for UCC, whereas it's a competition of swinging for the fence. It's who can hit the longest home run. So it was a little bit of a change for us, going to that kind of competition, but it's pretty darn exciting.
What are some of the changes that you do in preparation from, being a chasing points in the NHRDA from years past versus setting it up for an event like UCC?
So for, when we used to just strictly drag race it with the NHRDA stuff, we ran a 5.9 motor in it. We ran triple turbos, but it was not a big set at all. The truck would make anywhere from 1,200 horse up to 1,700 horse on kill. We never wanted to get into any kind of setup that would we wanted the truck to be reliable, not tear itself up every other pass, and we wanted something that was friendly to build boost at the line no matter what altitude we were at. Just something that we knew that we could put down the track quickly but consistently. Whereas UCC, we run a 6.8, a much bigger turbo setup on it. We'll run it anywhere from 1,600 horse all the way up to 2,200 horsepower. So traction issues become a little bit more of a problem running, the added displacement and just that amount of power in general. So the tune-up has to be a little bit more dialed in, but you're trying to lay down the fastest pass or the biggest number that you can. So that's the nature of it.
Do you think UCC 21 will be your fastest pass ever in the truck?
I sure hope so. That is what we're shooting for.
What's your current record?
We've ran a couple 5.4s with it.
Oh wow.
Quite a few, and they've all been 5.47s too.
Ooh.
So that's as fast as we've gone.
What's the goal this year? Are you trying to break that 490?
I would. I'd be pretty excited if we ran a 4 anything. Realistically, I don't think that's gonna happen. The truck is still nearly 6,000 pounds. It's a factory frame truck, so it is not a pro street truck by any means or anything like that. It still has a regular style cage. It's good down to 530, and if we could put up any kind of number that kicks us off the track, then that's kind of our goal.
So now I know you had said you're coming with a 6.8 liter in bigger turbos, applying. You're still running a triple turbo setup on the truck.
Yeah, we're going to put the triples back on it this year. We ran the single last year, and then in some of our we've been doing a little ODSS racing and a little local racing here and there. When COVID doesn't have everything shut down, and we've been running the single, trying to save as much weight as we can. But the truck has been faster with the triples, and it's just heavy the way that it is, and so if the name of the game's swinging for the fence, we're gonna put the triples on there and let it rip.
Okay. I love it. Everyone else is talking about spray. Maybe not necessarily at the track, but definitely at the dyno. What do you had mentioned 1,600 to 2,200. Man, our combined number out there is insane right now to hit. Are you guys going to be doing a big spray setup? Are you going to be swinging for it once it comes to the dyno, or is that one of the places that you think maybe playing a little more conservative and make sure you're around for Sunday is the name of the game?
Well, we're going to bring our old 5.9 with us that we used to run, so we're going to swing for the fence on the dyno. We never really have. Well, I guess we thought that we were, but compared to some of the other numbers that were thrown out there, we obviously weren't swinging hard enough. So we're going to take a rip at it this year, and at some point with any kind of stock appearing block, I think there is a limitation. The part of the adrenaline and the what is so intense about UCC is that you have to make that torque number too. And the torque number is that's the physical force, and that's what, you see these huge explosions and people just grenading motors. That's what does it. But that's what counts. How much torque you make on the dyno determines what chance you have of winning the whole event. So you have to make that big number and come prepared to do that. So.
Any additional safety precautions you guys are taking this year after seeing Tony's truck blow up at UCC last year and Baca's truck blow up at the event? I think that was last year as well.
No.
We have a dyno here. We do a lot of dyno tuning and whatnot, and we've always been pretty carefree about it. And knock on wood, we've never had any big problems. When Tony's truck caught on fire at UCC, that was in 19.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was on deck, the truck behind him, and had never seen anything like that happen on a dyno, let alone in person. And so we were sitting there, the next truck to go on, and I watched that whole thing and thought, blew my mind. I never thought that something that is so common to happen, a common failure. I mean, you blow up turbos all the time when you're pushing a diesel like that.
Yeah.
But just to see what happened, I mean, it was a real eye opener. We ran back to the trailer. I grabbed the fire suit, the helmet, everything, and threw it on. And so that's definitely going to be a practice this year. Keep the fire extinguishers closer, and hopefully you don't need it. You don't, even if you're pushing things to its limit, you don't intentionally plan on just grenading something to that point. But
right.
The truth is it's a very real possibility that something like that can happen.
Yeah, man, it's wild. I couldn't even imagine having to go up right after that.
Could you imagine just being in the cockpit, going up on your pole, and then that happens?
And watching the guy in front of you
literally
truck start on fire, and an extended amount of fire, and then having to go up next. Better you than me, Chris, I'll tell you that. The dyno's tough, man, and I always love talking to somebody who has a dyno and has a lot of experience on a dyno, because what we're seeing year over year is how you strap the truck to the dyno as a part of the equation. So it's not just the test window, it's not just how you come on the throttle.
There's also the driving on the dyno that we've been hearing from some of our competitors.
Yeah.
Chris, give us a little insight. Do you or have you played with how the truck gets strapped down, or have you tried different strategies of physically driving the truck on the dyno to get the tires to stick and not slip and things like that?
Oh, I guess it's a little hard to say. Our dyno here is a small roller dyno jet with an eddy brake, and it definitely, because it's a smaller roller compared to like the big Superflow that they have at UCC. Anytime we push something up, in that 16, 17, 1800 horse range, tire spin definitely becomes an issue. And if we try to run anything at 2000 horsepower, we have a pile of rubber behind the dyno when we're done. The UCC dyno is a little bit more forgiving, just because it's a bigger roller, so you have more tire, more circumference on the roller. I run drag radials on the dyno, which M&H says do not do it. You're not supposed to. Don't run this tire. But we've had the best luck with that, and so that's what we run. And as far as like truck placement on the roller, some guys say put it a little bit on the back side of the roller, so you're kind of driving uphill. Some guys say put it right smack on the top. Some people say a little forward. We typically go a little bit forward, and that's kind of been our best luck. And we run the tire PSI at the max. What tells you on the sidewall the max that it'll handle. We usually run it right there, maybe a smidge under.
That's an interesting strategy, right? Because you are testing quite a few things here, and you're, like I said, you're one of the few guys who has a chance to kind of play with these settings a little bit,
right,
and kind of see what actually makes a difference. Because most guys showing up have maybe run their truck on a dyno. Maybe. Most places they've gone, somebody else has had to run the truck on the dyno for them. So that's definitely an advantage that you have, especially add that to your racing experience. You have a lot of things going for you. Sled pulling, my understanding, maybe not quite as many passes under your belt.
Any sled pull pass I've ever made has been the 3 total that I've done at UCC. So, any advantage we have on the first 2 events, we give it up on on the third one.
Well, and sled pulling is one of those where, like, you know, hey, we're from the Midwest. Like, we've seen and been around and sled pulled a ton. There's so many things that come into sled pull. How much time do we spend talking about dirt at every sled pull?
Yeah, anytime that topic is brought up, the ground plays a big role. And I mean, I'm sure the ground and the dirt out in Texas is a little different than what you're going to get in Indianapolis.
Yeah, which plays a role into like tire setup and launch. How hard are you going to hit it out of the gate? You know, are you going to roll on the throttle or give it all the beans and go? And traditionally, what we've seen from drag racers is they launch like it's a drag race. I don't know if it's a great strategy.
Guilty.
If you're seeing hot, like we've. I'm not saying we've ever run late to go do a podcast recording, but maybe one time we're like a few minutes behind and running across the field to the sled pull, and I'm watching a regular cab bounce, and I want to say
you're hearing the truck stage.
Yeah,
okay? And I'm like, what the fuck? What are we doing? And then you see the truck hopping up and down and things like that, which is pretty wild to see.
Have you picked up anything over the last 3 attempts? If you're like, oh man, the first time I was horrible, I'm getting better, I learned this, here's what I'm going to do this year?
You know, so the first time I was absolutely the guy guilty of just dropping the hammer way too fast. You know, drag racing is a totally different feel, you know, and I didn't know what to anticipate. So, you know, hooking up to the sled, you know, watching them raise the flag, you know, your adrenaline starts going like you're watching the tree. And so, you know, I knew that I had to roll into it. You just don't let it rip. And so in my mind, I thought, okay, I've rolled out far enough, you know, it's time to get into it. And I remember as soon as I got into it, it was all over the rev limiter. I went, that might've been a little too fast. And, you know, we a couple of our buddies were down and, you know, helping us out in the pits, and they're more familiar with sled pulling. And I remember we got back to the pits, and I got out of the truck, and they're looking at me like, yeah, that was a little much there. So the second pull, I felt like I timed it pretty good. It turns out that you can overpower a sled pulling track just like you can overpower, you know, the 1/8 or 1/4 mile as well. And I think we had just a little too much power in it. I probably didn't need to run that kind of tune-up in it, but it's UCC, and you know, you're there to give it everything it's got. So that was a pretty good pull. And then our third pull was in 19, and that's when it rained. There's a monsoon, and they did the best they could with the track, but it was a really tricky track. And I know even people that are very familiar with sled pulling were even having a hard time reading it.
Oh yeah.
And I guess just not having the feel for it, you know, it was such a different feel than the other 2 times I had to compare it to. I felt like I needed to get into it because it didn't feel like it was going to be a traction thing. It just felt like literally like the truck was going to get stuck in the mud if I didn't get to going, you know. And we lost a drive shaft, so it wouldn't have mattered no matter what I did anyways. But it just, you know, like I'm used to feeling different tracks, you know, race tracks. You know, I can look at it and say, okay, I can just anticipate this feel and know how to react to it. But when it comes to the dirt, I don't have that info, and I've never done it before. So, you know, that's definitely where the guys that are used to the sled pulling, they get that big advantage there because they know how to react. You know, that's where the sport part comes of it. You know, it's not just about the truck; it's just knowing how to react to the situation and drive the truck accordingly.
Well, that's it, and I think too with sled pulling, like you said, even the guys who have a lot of experience, there's still times that you show up, and there's just only so much you can do. I mean, based on all the factors that come into this, you know, how heavy did they set the sled? What was the truck that they used to set the weight on the sled? Because that's not like a standardized thing, right? They kind of guesstimate it at each pull to try to limit you guys around 300 foot. But when there's trucks that are showing up that are 1,200 horsepower and 2,200 horsepower,
changes it.
Kind of hard to gauge where are these guys going to land, right? And I know that overall everybody is kind of picturing themselves like, okay, I've got my strategy on the dyno, I've got my strategy at the drag race, I've got my strategy at the sled pull. people are putting together plans to see themselves at the top. Chris, if you're at the top, who are the 2 other competitors you think make the top 3 with you?
Man, that's a good one. Obviously, anybody there is capable of being in the top 3. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. So it's really hard to narrow it down to 3. Obviously, I think Wade Minner, and not just because we're on the same team and everything and whatnot.
He's my buddy. He'll be there. Yeah, he'll win.
But all that aside, if I would, his truck, there's probably nobody there that'll cut a light on the track like he does. The truck makes good power on the dyno, and he actually has experience sled pulling, and he usually does, very respectable in the sled pull. So he's one of those guys that, he's not going to give up any points in any event. So I think that truck is a hard one to beat. The power driven guys, they can pull the sled out of the track in
literally out of the stadium. Yeah.
Literally out of the stadium. So the feat that they put on everybody, they make up points in a hurry, and they make a lot of horsepower now too. So their dyno should be very good. So those guys, and it shows, they're always in the very top. So that's another one that I would look out for as well.
Let's switch gears a little bit. I mean, we don't have the Levon competing, right? He stopped in 18. Derek Rose won in 19. Sean Baca, he's not competing this year. Do you see the top 3 podium being seasoned UCC competitors, or do you see some fresh blood, some new guys in that top 3 or top 6?
I think it's both. I really think that there's anybody that's there has a shot. There's some guys I know that have never done it before, but absolutely would be somebody to look out for. Just knowing them, just an example, this isn't everybody, but like Justin Ziegler, that truck they have a hell of a combo on it, and the guy knows how to drive. It's not a foreign truck to him, so I mean he could definitely show up and be very hard to catch as well.
Man, that's interesting. It's gonna be a fun year where we're seeing smaller shops, we're seeing privateers, we're seeing seasoned vets, we're seeing drag racers and sled pullers. Yep. This is gonna be one of those years that I think if you have a chance to still get to UCC, you got to do it, man. This is gonna be a big year.
Absolutely.
Chris, who would you like to give a shout out to?
First and foremost, obviously all the guys at the shop. Nate, Phillip, Chandler, everybody else, the hours they put into the truck, and just, even our day-to-day at the shop just to make it all possible. I mean, literally could not do it without them. My wife, Sarah, for tolerating this. I think all the wives of UCC are probably pretty darn patient to tolerate all of us and all this stuff, all this crazy stuff we do. And then we have some pretty killer sponsors. Brian at BTS, Brian's Truck Shop, builds our trans, and I mean it takes a beating. He's always been top notch. The guys at S&S, I mean, there's not a finer fuel system in the world. Dave at One Up, if there's anything about suspension, he's forgotten more about suspension than most of us will ever know. It doesn't matter if it's, 4-link or leaf springs or in the dirt sled pulling or drag racing. I mean, he's been there, he's done it all, and his advice has always been super valuable. Wade at, WM Welding Industrial Maintenance, he always helps us out with the shop stuff we need around the shop, and then going to the events and stuff. I mean, him and his company have helped us a ton. And then, the guys at SoCal and the guys at Freedom Racing, motor parts, motor building. I mean, two of the best motor builders in the country, and just darn good guys in general, So very thankful to have them on the team too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining our listeners and carving out some time for them. Guys, make sure you stick around. Coming up next, we're going to have another segment here from our super tech, Jeremy Garnett. And, of course, we'll also be doing some diesel diagnostics here at the end of the show. Jeremy Garnett, super tech. How the hell are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. This is... I don't even know how many of these super tech segments we've done, and people are really starting to give us positive feedback. Guys, if you want to give Jeremy some positive feedback, jump on over to jgarnett00 on Instagram. Make sure you follow him, give him a like, and send him a message. Tell him you heard about him here on Diesel Performance Podcast. Jeremy, what's the truck we're talking about today?
Well, it's Duraburb, twin turbo Duraburb.
Duraburb.
Yeah.
This is a build that I got to see to come together, God, I want to say in like 2013.
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
It's been a hot minute. It's a 03.
Yep.
It originally had an LB7 with a Stealth 64 S475, and then I think it might have went up to a 483 at some point, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And then the truck had the engine out of it, and it was sitting in our shop last year. This year, I saw it with the engine sitting out of it in the shop. What do you mean we're talking about the Duraburb?
Well, Duraburb broke the crank.
No.
So, truck was running pretty rough. Came back, has a bunch of power, and the weakest link kind of took a shit.
Yeah, man, it's a rough story. I already know we broke the crank out of it. This truck had made 1043 to the rear wheels at one point.
Yeah.
Has been on cross-country trips with families in it.
I just towed a trailer Kentucky.
That has had trailers hooked up to it. This is one of those 1,000 horsepower street-driven trucks that gets used like a 1,000 horsepower street-driven truck.
Yeah, as a family go-getter.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so the crank finally went in it after all these years. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's not surprising, but if somebody was out really romping on it, I could see it happening. I get it.
Yeah, it's obviously what happened. But,
Yeah.
They were out beating on it, but it was just a fun build, man. Just from taking everything apart because, I didn't get to do the original build.
Right.
That was prior to me being here, and, I've always enjoyed this vehicle, and now it being my turn, and me being the guy that I love to do this stuff. I love to tear into it.
And that truck has kind of a fun history where it was built at Duraburb, built for a customer by Duraburb out of Florida. That customer then sold it. I think that's when Nick grabbed it.
Yep.
And then Nick drove it until I think the first engine went in it. And then put a built motor in it, and then now that built motor is the one that you tore out.
Yes.
So where'd we go with it?
Well, what we did is we just we refreshed it. So it's the same build. So the motor's still girdled. It's the same girdle. It's the same pistons that are in it, but we had them refreshed and recoated.
Okay.
So there has Wangler rods in it. So our engine builder sent the rods back out, and they were checked and everything written off right by Wangler, right back to them, so everything's installed. And then we put an ATS new flywheel on it. So it just they didn't like the way it was balanced, so we put a new flywheel on it.
Okay.
So, now the motor's balanced, it's ready to go. We did not do anything but change the crank, as in that's the newest part, and we went with the Cali crank in it. So it's a forged crank in it. It's a billet crank.
Fuck yeah.
Very expensive, very heavy, and if it breaks, that's good for him.
I love it. Okay, so same turbo setup, fuel setup, all went back on it. Is it driving?
Yeah, actually, just put about 100 miles on it.
So, guys, we're going to shut down the podcast right now. I'm going to go take a quick drive the Duraburb break, and I'll be right back. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, you put 100 miles on it already.
Yeah.
Is it still just as smooth as ever? I do love driving that truck.
I do. I actually had to go pick up something last night about 30 miles away, so I was like, well, I got to put some miles on it. So
I got to test drive something.
Right. We did that. Only thing I'm not a huge fan is it does have polyurethane motor mounts in it, so it does not have the factory motor mounts in it. So you do get the built motor, a little bit of a vibration, like brrr,
Yeah.
So other than that, I mean, it's just smooth as can be.
Just so smooth.
And then once you hit fifth gear and you're just laying into about 50% throttle, a second charger just comes to life and.
It never runs out. That's what I always say about twins, and especially like that twin setup is like, does not matter where you're at in the throttle, does not matter what speed you are, nothing matters. If you give it more throttle, it has more go.
And the thing is, it's only a 64 in the valley. It's not a big turbo.
No, it's not. It's not a crazy competition build. It is a street driven build.
Yeah, 1,000 horsepower. I mean, that's fun, and you could bring it to the racetrack and take your family to lunch.
That's it, man. Yeah, what more could you ask for, right?
Yeah, it was actually Anthony, one of our sales guys, and I were just talking about it. He was up against the Durber was up against Worley's regular cab at the track last fall, and it went 11.4.
Oh, it's so stupid. It's such a crazy pass.
Yeah.
In what you then like. It also, by the way, in this pass had the third row seat still in it.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like, oh, we put it on slicks and pulled all the seats out. It was like, no. Like literally told kids to get out of it and left their car seats strapped in and ran an 11.4.
Yeah, and it's still got the Terra grappler tires on it.
Yeah.
So
then drove it home.
Yeah.
That's it, man. Did you run into anything interesting on this one?
No, this one actually went pretty smooth. Just take your time. I mean, that's when it comes to a build like this, you just take your time, take that extra, few hours.
I think that's a good pro tip on this one.
Just take your time and everything on it.
Like you got a build that has, we're not even going to talk about a dollar amount to this build,
No.
but like there is a dollar amount to this build that some people might be claiming for their income in 2020. What are you rushing for? And I've told this to customers too, is like, dude, if you're going to drop your truck off, you've made a large investment. Like if time frame is your biggest concern, I don't know that that's the way we want to approach the build.
Yeah. I mean, and this isn't somebody's everyday driver.
No.
But this is something that they could, but it's not.
Right. Yeah. They're not missing work because we're finishing the truck.
Exactly.
Or looking over everything twice for the third time, right?
Exactly.
As you're like,
right.
Just ease up, make sure it's perfect, then you can give it back to the customer.
Exactly. Like we'll go over the tune. Like Nick's gonna go just revise the tune a little bit and play with it a little bit and just make sure it's perfect and
then give me the keys, and when I put my stamp of approval on it, he could have it back next year.
Exactly. He could have it after me.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, I think this has been a fun one. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Have a good day.
Guys, make sure you stick around. We have another diesel diagnostic segment coming up at you right away. Sean Lynn, how the hell are you?
Good. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing great. Sean, I really enjoy where we're going with our diesel diagnostic segment here on the show. I'm glad that you and your cohort, Mike, have been able to come down and kind of join us. I think we got a really fun one today.
I think you're right on that.
So guys, what we're going to do is we're going to dive in a little bit differently. Usually I try to throw out some symptoms and then Sean Lynn will help us get to a solution. This time we're going to go differently. I'm going to go, hey, Sean, I have a dirty mass airflow sensor. Tell me some of the symptoms that customers might call in and complain with if they have a dirty mass airflow sensor.
Yeah, Paul, to be honest, it happens pretty much on a weekly basis here. And we get questions like, hey, I don't know if my truck is changing tunes, or hey, I just installed this intake. Hey, this intake's been on here a while. And usually we look at the intake when the mass airflow sensor is dirty.
Yeah. So there's a couple of reasons for that. And I think one of the symptoms I always remember guys bringing up is like, hey, my truck feels like it has no power. And then I always like to ask that question of like, does it ever come up on power? And they'll be like, well, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. It runs like a dog, and then it hits like 2,200 RPM. That's just an example. But then it hits 2,200 RPM, and it runs like a raped ape. And I'm like, mass airflow sensor, almost every time. Now you deal a lot too, I think, and I like that one you mentioned about like, oh, it doesn't feel like my tune's switching. It doesn't feel like I have any more power between 1 and 5. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've actually experienced this myself because I do a lot of the in-house tuning installs here. And the example I have for you guys is a 2014 LML. So I actually installed the tuning on there, made sure everything was working properly, and I took it for a drive, and I was like, hey, I'm not really feeling too much of a change here. And so then I started data logging the fuel rate between 1 and tune 5, and it was very low on the fuel and very low on the mass airflow sensor. So I popped the hood, and sure as hell there's an oiled filter under there, and the mass airflow sensor was filthy. So it was about half the power it should have had.
I want to talk about two things with this because these bring up some really good points. Number one, the reason you get a low fuel rate or low performance when you have a dirty mass airflow sensor is because, especially on a Duramax, but they're on all the trucks, the mass airflow sensor calls for fuel. So as your truck senses more air passing over the mass airflow sensor, it says, okay, we can add more fuel and the mixture isn't going to create a bunch of smoke. Very, very crucial for an emissions-equipped truck, but important across the board. That's why even LB7s have a mass airflow sensor, right? So 01 to 04 Duramaxes have them. When you get a dirty mass airflow sensor, what we're saying is that oil, debris, whatever, is blocking the sensor, and it's not going to read that the correct amount of air is passing over it. So even as you're accelerating 30, 40, 50 miles an hour, you should have plenty of air passing over the sensor so that the truck will automatically command more fuel, thereby making more power, and it won't do that because it's not seeing the air. Now, can you dive a little bit into why oiled filters are notoriously a part of this problem?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Due to the nature of it being a turbocharged engine, it's naturally going to pull in a lot of air. And depending on how you maintain your filter or how you don't maintain it, you could potentially over-oil it when you service it, and then the turbocharged engine is going to pull in a lot of air really fast, and it's going to block part of that sensor, so your truck's not going to be reading the airflow that it should.
Growing up around like dirt bikes and quads and things like that, the oiled filter was always a little more expensive, and it was always the better one. We consider that the premium option because if you had oil on the filter, like the certain amount of oil in the filter, it would catch more debris. It'll catch more dust, right? Compared to a dry filter. Totally logical. No question. However, the mass airflow sensor is in the intake, so it's in your cold air intake right behind the air filter. So especially in the Duramaxes, it's very close to each other, and that oil is going to start to seep through that filter, and it's going to pull itself and get stuck to your mass airflow sensor, and that's immediately going to cause the problem.
Yeah, I mean, we always recommend customers clean the mass airflow sensor and then go with a good dry filter because it's easier to clean. And, it's not going to pull oil through then.
That's right. Yeah. You got a diesel. Quit being cheap. I don't care about a washable filter. No, it's not worth it. Just go get a dried filter that you could throw away, a disposable filter. Who cares? I literally have told guys on the phone, I'd rather hear you running a coffee filter in your intake than to keep that oiled filter on there because it's only causing more and more drivability issues as we go.
Yeah.
Please, just real quick disclaimer, please don't go put a coffee filter in your intake.
It's difficult for some people because they read into it and they're like, oh, awesome, I got the oiled filter, I got the premium option, but down the road, it's definitely not helping you out.
There you go, man. I think that's real sound advice. Guys, if you want to hear more great advice like this, make sure you subscribe to the show. How are you listening? You're not already subscribed. And then, of course, if you want feedback, if you would like me to read your feedback on the show, it's super simple. Head over to iTunes, find the podcast, leave us a 5-star review. If you leave us a 5-star review, I very well may read it on the show one day. For right now, let's kick it back over to Chris and myself. He'll join me to wrap up this show.
Increase the durability, line pressure, and performance of the Allison transmission in your GM 6.6-liter Duramax LML and L5P with the XDP EPC solenoid Fuller plug. From the factory, the EPC solenoid increases line pressure up to 230 psi during shifting. Once the shift is complete, the pressure drops back down to 80 psi. At 80 psi of line pressure, your Allison cannot hold the added stress from aftermarket upgrades or heavy towing. The XDP EPC solenoid Fuller fixes this issue by installing onto the solenoid and back into the valve body. This lets your transmission effectively operate at 230 psi all the time. This eliminates clutch slipping, poor shifting, and extends transmission life. To find out more about the XDP EPC solenoid fooler plug, check out xdp.com or find a local dealer near you.
Chris, people have been hearing us talk about Exergy Performance, well, since the start of the show.
Right, of course. They've been a believer since the inception, to say the least.
I know I just recently talked to Randy Harkema over there. Guys, of course, you recognize him from our snake oil or not fuel additive episode. He's one of the guys at Exergy that we rely on for technical expertise. And I thought it was really cool. I was just talking to him about going to UCC.
Okay.
You remember the booth that they bring to UCC every year?
Yeah, I remember 2019. They do this really cool engine stand with a Cummins with their standalone with a throttle, a hand throttle, and you can, be part of the engine operating. They start it, you can rev it and all that cool stuff. And I think it's really cool because it gives you that hands-on experience to say, hey, here's Exergy's fuel system, here's Exergy's standalone, Bosch standalone, here's everything working.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you can't forget it once you've seen it.
I didn't push too hard to ask all the details because I like to walk around UCC and kind of be surprised by what I'm going to see. But I will just say that if you're going to UCC this year, make sure you go swing by the Exergy Performance booth. You're definitely going to want to check out what they have.
Oh, man. That's exciting.
Chris, you know WC Fab and WC Fab powder coating. It's going to be one of those places that if you've never heard of them and you go check out their booth at UCC, or if you go to their shop and kind of hang out and see even just the foyer, like the waiting room, you're going to be wildly impressed.
It's tough because you don't know if someone were to tell me, hey, they do all these crazy powder coat colors, they do compound turbo kits, triple turbo kits, intercooler piping kits, whatever. I am a very simplistic individual, so I have a basic thought process or picturing in my head of what's going on. And if you see their work in person, they're very meticulous with, their fabrication. The welding is superb. But their coloring options that they have from their in-house powder coating service is second to none. There's like 400 colors that they keep in stock. Yeah. All of their signature colors are, they're the most popular for a reason. They stick out the most. And I mean, Paul, man, over the years being at Calibrated Power, we have seen so many WC Fab trucks come and go, being on the dyno, things like that. And, I remember when I first started, it was exciting to see a 700, 800, or 1,000 wheel horse truck. And you just know if a truck's coming from WC Fab here, it's going to make big power. I normally just get excited for what kind of color schemes under the hood of the truck. But you're going to get what you pay for. They offer a really good quality product and they have a really good support staff. They're going to stand behind what they do. And I think that goes a long way, especially this day and age in this industry.
Absolutely. All right, man. Like we said, a mellow guy, but I think clearly he has his head on his shoulders of being a competitor.
Yep. And I mean, just talking about the different turbo setups that they've done in the past, and he's broken a lot of records, man. That's right. He's a decorated competitor is the best way to put it. So I'm really excited to see Chris's truck at UCC. We're a couple weeks away, man. So we're looking forward to it.
Here we go. All right, guys. For today, this has been Paul Wilson
and Chris Hemke.
Thanks for listening.
Chris has a deeper voice, so
Well, full grown up.
I know, I get it.